So first off, we have on the line with us Miss Libby Mason. So Miss Mason is a social science teacher for junior high students. So Miss Mason, tell us a little bit about the age and what you teach.
Okay, so I teach ninth graders, and most of them are 14. And I teach economics. I teach a semester of economics, including microeconomics, macroeconomics, and personal finance in one semester. And I also teach a semester of government and government.
So I'll tell you viewers a little background information. So Miss Mason was actually my economics and civics teacher. But what's important about that, I always get, how was your college education? Was it one-sided? What did they teach you about government? Well, Miss Mason was my civics teacher. She was my economics teacher. I never had to take social studies or history in college. And so she was it. Now, in my experience, I had a very neutral, truth based education. So, Ms. Mason, what is your philosophy with teaching students the truth rather than, some politically charged, one sided conversation?
I agree with you, Hannah. I think most social studies classes, well, all social studies classes really are truth based. There are basic fundamental points that we teach in economics. They're basic just ideas that it doesn't matter what your viewpoint is politically, these things hold true. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Supply and demand, the laws of supply, the laws of demand. These things are truth based. Our government, our Constitution, the way it was written, we have three branches of government. These things are truth based. And so my personal philosophy of teaching these things is I present, these ideas as truth. And then, invariably those students ask me my opinion. And a lot of teachers won't share their opinions, but I try to, early on in the school year, establish a classroom of respect. And that's the basic underlying principle. And so when they ask my opinion, I tell them. I say, okay, now I'm going to take off my teacher hat here for a minute because you've asked my opinion. So now I'm just Libby Mason, general citizen, just like you, and I'm going to tell you what I think. But I always follow that up with, students, you just make up your own mind based on your morals, based on your thoughts about things. And I always try to tell them who should be shaping. We have a conversation. Who should be shaping your thoughts and ideas? Mainly your parents, probably, your community of faith, and just your own personal sense of wrong and right based on those things. And then I tell them my opinion, and I'll tell them, now, just because I'm a teacher and I have this degree doesn't mean that my opinion is the right opinion. The truth is truth. My opinion relates to things, though, is my opinion, and I try to teach them not to be swayed by other people's opinions. So that's kind of where I come from with the way I teach my classes.
Very cool. So I had you almost a decade ago, which seems crazy to me.
No, that's crazy.
So when I had you, I remember distinctly to this day, we learned about, capitalism was on top, free market. And then we learned, next comes socialism and all the trials, if you will, that come with it. And then, of course, communism is on the bottom. And that was our curriculum. That's what our textbook taught us. How has that changed over the years? Have you seen a shift to, maybe a more tolerable view of these other things? Kind of has society has begun to evolve? Have you noticed the curriculum doing the same thing?
Our frameworks, as far as Arkansas's frameworks about what we teach based on economics, our frameworks have not changed. And to me, again, at the way these different systems, the way their standard of living, and Adam Smith wrote he wrote Wealth of Nations back in the 1700s, and that those ideas still remain the same. People in their own self-interest, if everybody does what's in their best self-interest, society as a whole is going to be better. And that's the problem, I think, with some of the issues. The students don't understand. They have a basic lack of understanding of what the economic systems are. So when I have ninth graders come in and they, whatever politicians run lately that's like, oh, free education for everyone. It sounds good, and it does sound good. but it just doesn't fundamentally work. And so after they've had, after we've talked about the basic economic systems and who decides what products are made and who decides how resources are going to be used and this is a big one, who decides who's going to get those products. After we talk about those things, students start to see and most part realize, these other economic systems they don't hold up as well. And for me, the basic problem is that people fundamentally aren't good. We have our own self-interest at heart, but greed and corruption, which we're going to be talking about that later, those things come because we're human beings and we're flawed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So have you noticed, everyone pins millennial and Gen Z, and I'm sure now what you teach are considered Gen Z. We kind of get pegged as almost a lazy generation. We don't have the old school values that, our parents and grandparents have. Do you notice a shift in the students, just work ethic in general, or their receptiveness or eagerness to learn?
I feel like I have a skewed viewpoint because I have pre-AP students for the most part. And most of the kids who sign up for that class are intrinsically motivated and they want that grade, they want those high marks, and most of them, for the most part, put in the work to get it. Now, I have had a few come along that felt like they were entitled to an A because I'm in all these smart classes, I should just get it, and they didn't put together, you got to work for that. But I think overall, I probably don't see that as much as I would if I had a balance of just the core class and the pre-AP classes.
Well, and see, I think what you said, for the most part, they're willing and eager. And that's been my experience also with my generation. We get a bad rap, but the people I know, we work hard for what we want and we, get an education and we do all these things. And so I think, the few get a bad name for the majority, but I think, there's a silent majority of the good hard workers still out there.
I agree with that.
So what about parents? You teach a subject that could potentially be charged with a lot of opinion. Yeah. Have you ever had any pushback from parents who don't agree with what you teach or may not like, the truth that you teach?
I have not. Knock on wood. I haven't. And I don't know if it's the area that we live in that tends to be a little more I'll just say conservative, leaning that way.
Absolutely.
That the way that we teach things lines up more with what the majority of people believe. I don't know if it's that or if it's because of the way I hope maybe this is part of it too, the way that I teach my class and that I really basically fundamentally, yes, I'm teaching economics and civics, but what I really am trying to teach is I'm trying to teach kids to think for themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think that because I present the material in that way, I think that's why I've not had a lot of pushback. Now, I know I have had students that have different viewpoints. I have had parents that have had different viewpoints just based on, the way that they've talked in parent-teacher conferences, but I've never had any conflict related to that.
Well, and I think that speaks volumes. We can disagree about the topic, but as long as we have a good civil conversation about it, I can level with that all day long.
Absolutely, and that's it. That's fundamentally what I'm trying to do. With the election year next fall will be an interesting period. Actually, even in the spring, I'll see students come in and they'll talk about such and such candidate. For the most part, though, they don't really know what they're talking about a lot of times. Now, they're 14 and 15 years old, so they want to sound like things are important to them, but they don't really have a deep understanding of it yet. So,
absolutely.
It'll be interesting.
So you have 2 college-age students, which is interesting. Most parents don't have the chance to have both of their kids in college at the same time. Have your kids had any interesting run-ins, if you will, in college that you being, the civics teacher that you are, you think, that may not be quite right?
Well, it's interesting. I just had this conversation with my daughter yesterday. She's a history major. She's going to be graduating in May. And no, she is not going to be a teacher. That's her number one question she always gets. No teaching. She's interested in historic preservation. And so we've had a lot of conversations about monuments being torn down, why they were put up in the first place, those kind of conversations. And I asked her that question because she doesn't really talk a whole lot about, she talks about her professors, but she's never shared an experience like that. And I think we had this conversation yesterday, and she says that she definitely could tell, like, politically where her professors fall on the political spectrum, but she personally had never felt like any of them had ever tried to force her to believe a certain way or change her beliefs. And it may be because of the subject matter, because she is a history major. And so if she were a political science major, she feels like maybe it would have been a little bit different.
Right. They have the same duty that you do. They're there to teach the truth. I mean, there's only one history,
Right.
and there's only one
Right.
way to teach it. And it's almost reckless to kind of teach it with that skewed eye.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. One of my cohorts teaches 8th grade, and at Tech we have, we teach American history in 8th grade. Pretty much everybody, I think, in Arkansas teaches American history in 8th grade. And he gets very upset with the textbook a lot based on what it emphasizes and what it leaves out. And so he will just take it upon himself. He'll say, okay, your textbook devotes 2 sentences to this idea or to this event. He said, here's what happened. And he'll go on and tell them. And the kids love him. They love it.
So one last thing before you go, do you have any words of advice to maybe either parents who have children in school that are struggling with, maybe not their children getting the whole truth, or even young teachers out there who are struggling to, teach the truth when the outside world is so politically charged?
Yes. First of all, I would say, you have to be true to yourself first. And, we as teachers, I personally feel like teaching is a calling. I feel like it's the area that I'm supposed to be in. I had some teachers in elementary that shaped me because they were teaching and they shouldn't have been. And so, first of all, that's what I would say. Strive to, teach with your heart, and when it's not your passion anymore, move on and do something else. Secondly, I would say don't be afraid to teach the truth boldly. Don't be afraid to teach the truth boldly. One of the first things I did when I started teaching in Arkansas was I looked for a non-union professional organization that could provide me with insurance. And so I found one, and there's a really good one out there that will support us professionally, but doesn't get involved in politics, which was extremely important to me. They speak only to educational matters, and when they do speak educational matters, it's based on member surveys. And so that was something else that was important to me. I'm not concerned about how should I say it? I'm not concerned about getting in trouble with a parent or with the community based on what I'm teaching, because I know that what I'm teaching is right. But also, number 2, I know that I have support there if I need it.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's incredibly insightful. Miss Mason, it has been a pleasure to have you on with me, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate it. And remember, also, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, we'll be right back after this break.